It's permanent, established, large scale. 60% of the jobs in the global south are located here. They're products of informal globalization. You can see this informal economy in the industrialized world also, in London, Paris, Rotterdam, as we saw the market just out here today, this Caribbean market. No? These immigrants don't have the power to implant these new economies. They're responding to an effective demand for a certain new way to produce goods and services. Take Wall Street at lunchtime, a familiar image, the skyscraper. I will hear you want to say something about the density.
Yeah.
So in a way, we're talking about modernism, or this new notion of informality in the combination of these two densities. Okay, so in Caracas, the barrios are a sustainable development. They produce less trash than other parts of the city. The few who collect this trash have formed a cooperative which sells recycled goods. They're optimistic about the future of their enterprise, given the need for sustainability. These are new social actors that emerge on the critical economic terrain of new possibilities. It's important that we not look at informality as a sector existing apart from the legitimate urban economy. It is superimposed, interlinked with the formal.
So the research we did for our book demonstrated something quite striking for us. We thought, maybe as many of you might think as well, that would be the way how to work with a particular site, with a particular program. We thought so as well, until we saw things like that. So while our colleagues and friends and many people that we know in other places have not really looked at, or rather overlooked, these urbanizations, which are, as Alfredo says, sometimes not even mapped within the city of Caracas. They're just not there, therefore they also don't receive tax money, therefore the population also doesn't receive attention from the state. We thought, well, this is actually quite sophisticated. So what looks from the distance, maybe from the ground, as something that is hard to understand, once you look at it from the air, it looks actually like patterns that evolve, something that is maybe not taught in universities, something which maybe looks like it comes out of some chaos theory or some other placemaking possibility to break up territories as well. But it is more than something which lies in the aesthetics of it. It has more inscribed in it. So we think, since the majority of the citizens in metropolitan Caracas now live already in these informal parts of the city, and the proportion continues to increase, this is a quite startling fact, and it suggests it is not longer possible to aspire concepts of the 19th century or 20th century European city, or to an Orwellian urban beautification program. A new city is emerging for the majority of the world's population, one that undermines the dream of an ordered, planned and controlled traditional environment based on the paradigms of town planning as we knew it. Even cities like Paris, Berlin or New York have only about 5% of the built surface that corresponds to the ideals that are promoted through tourist brochures, etc., etc. So what is New York? It's not the south tip of Manhattan. Who goes to New York and spends his days walking through the Bronx or driving to Staten Island to see what that area looks like? So if that is so, the regime of exclusion and the absence of beauty in the civilized urban context raises a series of questions. Is it necessary to abandon the idea of the city as we knew it completely before a new city can be realized? Or, for a great majority of the citizens in Caracas, this city has already been answered. Yet the planning machinery in the city has failed to recognize the need for an updated understanding or a new mindset of what that urban environment means to them. There are current initiatives of a housing office which is called CONAVI, which is just simply the state housing office, which is revising a plan that is trying to present again, from our point of view, rather outdated housing concepts to resettle people. There are also programs which rather aspire to maybe better the conditions within those areas that we just presented. The reality is that the new clients and the promoters within this area are actually persons like Alicia, which you just see here on the photograph in the construction site of her own house. That's another person, Horacio. He's 89 years old, and he's one of the founders 50 years ago of this barrio that you saw at the very beginning that counts today 800,000 people. And let's say he is one of the network persons in this area. It's an area where you find not a single town hall, no post office, no police station. It's just a big, huge building, you could almost call it, where some roads cut through, but in principle, people go to their houses by foot. Here you see some charts that we did just on the basis of looking into the history also, how these buildings came into existence. And what is quite surprising, here you see, for instance, an area that we studied with Horacio, whom we just saw before, that started in 1955. And well, this would actually continue from 84 to about 2004. But what you see in this first stretch of the years is that the people who founded those houses, or those pioneers, you could almost say, who settled that hills, they started with a square meter surface per person of 5. That's just related to the first chart. The rest is practically repetitions of it. You see then in what condition those houses were. You see the key downstairs. Rancho is called like a very simple shack put together like our sheet metal, cardboard, etc. And then it reaches another state of becoming a stable house, which means in Caracas a concrete frame filled with the cheapest building material available, which is in Caracas red brick block, in Mexico City concrete block, and in other world regions something else, maybe even timber or some wood product. So within the progression of this house, this structure grew, and right now the people who live there, which are actually 2 generations, they have 16 square meter per person. So if you look at those numbers, you also see that the image of a little shack somewhere up the hill in a let's say in a rather marginal environment has to be reviewed also, as probably none of you lives in an apartment with his family where you have per person 16 square meters available. That would be a rather luxurious place, and you also see that you have even larger buildings. So it's quite curious, why are these people building houses to that extent? There's a lot of rental space in these houses. Many of the individuals, they own a series of buildings in these urbanizations. So we have to completely review this idea that they're migrants that building a little house for themselves. This is like a city on its own, with its own rules, its own real estate market. There are buildings sold and bought and resold. So all of that is interesting to us, and we think it has not been sufficiently studied.
The government recently had to evict a series of houses of, I think, like 200 units in an area where a bridge was falling down, and they were giving them checks of 50,000, 50 million bolivares, which would be equivalent to about $10,000, $10,000, $12,000. And with that, they could not even go to the market and find anything equivalent in size, in quality, as the house that they had built for themselves. So it's an interesting problem.
Well, here you see another chart. I will just jump over it now if somebody's interested. We are happy to present it later on, but it shows a relation of how people financed those constructions, etc., etc.
This is some field work that we've been doing by figuring out how they work. This is a good story. Go ahead.
This is, for instance, an example which is quite interesting, because in the top row you see a government housing plan that had been implemented where they offered a little housing unit, which you see here in the section then with a street lantern next to it. And they thought that in a model which is called progressive housing. So let's say the concept that people build on their houses is sufficiently recognized to supply